A black mechanic gets fired on the spot for helping a Hell's Angel reach his dying son. But what the manager didn't know, that biker was the CEO's brother. What happens next flips the entire town upside down. Would you risk your job to do the right thing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that hit where it hurts and heals. The morning air in Copper Ridge carried a crisp dryness, the kind only found in desert towns where the heat hadn't yet claimed the day. The sun hung low over the flat Nevada horizon, throwing long shadows across rusted chain-link fences, dry scrub brush, and cracked asphalt. Just off Highway 86, where the road veered slightly toward the Canyonlands, sat Red Rock Auto, a weather-beaten garage with a faded red sign and a half-lit neon open that blinked more in protest than invitation. The town itself wasn't much, half ghost town, half mining relic, with more trucks than people and more gossip than news. Inside the garage, the air smelled of oil, rubber, and faint cigarette ash. The hum of overhead lights blended with the occasional hiss of an air compressor. Terry Cole, 26, lay on a dolly beneath a battered '08 Dodge Ram, his muscular arms glistening with sweat as he worked a rusted bolt loose with methodical precision. He wore a gray work shirt with the name T. Cole stitched above the chest pocket, now soaked through at the collar. His skin was deep brown, his close-cropped hair dusted lightly with grease. There was something about his posture, shoulders slightly tensed, eyes focused but weary, that revealed more than words ever could. Terry was built like someone used to lifting more than his share, both physically and figuratively. He didn't talk much at work, not because he was shy, but because he'd learned long ago that silence was safer. He moved with quiet efficiency, earning respect from engines, if not from men. In this garage, that respect was rarely extended his way. Above the Dodge, a voice echoed across the shop floor. "Hey, Cole, you gonna marry that truck, or fix it sometime this year?" It was Donnie Clay, a heavy-set mechanic in his mid-40s, bald except for a greasy horseshoe of blonde hair and a thick chew tucked into his lip. Donnie had a face like weathered leather and a laugh like a dying chainsaw. Terry didn't respond. He didn't need to. He finished tightening the bolt and slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands with a faded blue rag. In the corner, Earl Thatcher, the shop manager, leaned in the office doorway, arms crossed over his chest. Earl was a wiry man in his 50s, with thin gray hair combed hard to the side and a permanent squint like the sun was always in his eyes. He wore a button-down shirt and a belt that carried more attitude than authority. Earl didn't shout unless there were customers around, but his presence alone was enough to sour milk. He was a man who measured worth in skin color and spoken rules he applied selectively. "Truck's done," Terry muttered to Earl. "Needs a new serpentine belt within a month, but it'll run for now." Earl gave a half nod and flicked ash from his cigarette into a nearby coffee can. About time. He didn't thank Terry. He never did. By noon, the heat had begun to thicken. A breeze swept through the garage bay, carrying dust and silence with it. Terry stepped out back during his break, where a single picnic bench sat beneath a scrawny mesquite tree. He pulled out a worn paper bag, turkey sandwich, half a banana, and a folded napkin. On the napkin, a message written in childlike scrawl. "Don't forget my drawing today. Love, Amy." Amy Cole was 12, small for her age, with delicate limbs and light freckles across her cheeks. Born with cerebral palsy, she spent most of her days in a modified wheelchair beside the living room window of their duplex, drawing pictures of stars, desert animals, or Terry in his work uniform. She couldn't speak clearly, but she communicated with her eyes, and those eyes told him more than words ever could. Every night, Terry bathed her, fed her, and read to her from a tattered copy of The Wind in the Willows. His mother had died when Amy was 6. There was no one else. His goal, what drove every swing of a wrench, every swallowed insult, was to get her out of Copper Ridge. He had found a clinic in Reno, specialized in progressive therapy. The price was beyond him, but he was saving quietly, stubbornly. Back inside, the shop was buzzing with heat and indifference. Donnie laughed at a joke Terry didn't hear. Earl barked something about invoices. Terry tuned it all out as he moved to the next repair. He didn't need their friendship, just the hours. At 3:15 p.m., as the sun bore down like a silent threat, the garage door creaked open with a low groan. A motorcycle rumbled to a stop just outside the bay. It was a Harley Davidson Road King, matte black, glinting under the dust. The rider killed the engine and swung his leg off, kicking the stand down with a practiced jerk. Rider Wolf Gannon stood tall, maybe mid-40s, with a frame built from long roads and longer nights. His weather jeans were tucked into scuffed boots, his black leather vest stitched with red and white patches that read Hell's Angel and Nevada Chapter. Thick tattoos crept up his arms and neck like smoke trails, and his beard was more salt than pepper. His eyes, sharp blue but tired, darted across the garage. He looked like trouble, but his voice cracked with something else. "Someone help me, please. I broke down outside town. My son's in a hospital up in Carson. Wrecked his bike. They said he's not going to make it through the night. I just need someone to look at the engine. Anything. Please." The shop fell silent. Donnie leaned on the hood of a truck. "We don't do drop-ins, biker." Earl emerged from the office. "You got a ticket?" Wolf shook his head. "No time. I'll pay whatever it takes." Earl crossed his arms. "This ain't a charity. There's a bus stop 5 blocks down." The man looked like he'd been punched. He backed up half a step, lips parting, but no sound coming. Terry stood at his station, silent. The same way people had looked at him when his mother was dying and no one would drive them to the clinic. He tossed down his rag, walked over. "What's it doing?" he asked. Wolf blinked, stunned. "Engine's stalling. Smells like burnt wiring. Ignition's acting weird." Terry nodded once. "Pop the seat. I'll take a look." "Cole," Earl snapped. "That's not your call." "I'll clock out," Terry said flatly. "Won't charge the shop." Earl took a step forward. "You touch that bike, you're done." Terry knelt by the motorcycle anyway. "Sir, hand me that Allen wrench." Wolf handed it over. Earl turned red. "You're out, Cole." "Fired." Terry looked up calmly. "Okay." He kept working, hands steady, while the rest of the garage watched in disbelief. The engine clicked. The fuel line hissed. Terry's fingers moved like music. Wolf stood above him, silent, grateful. 20 minutes later, the engine roared back to life. Wolf reached for his wallet. "I don't know what to say." Terry handed him back the wrench. "Go. Your son's waiting." Wolf paused, then nodded once. "Name's Ray. Ray Gannon. I won't forget this." As he rode off, the thunder of the Harley echoing down the canyon road, Terry stood alone in the center of the garage. Fired, broke, but somehow freer than he had been in years. The sun had just begun its slow descent over Copper Ridge, casting long gold streaks across the cracked pavement outside Red Rock Auto. The lingering heat of the afternoon baked the air, turning it thick and stagnant. Dust swirled lazily in the wake of passing trucks, and the shadow of the garage stretched toward the railroad tracks like a warning sign. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Terry Cole stood by the open garage bay, his toolbox locked, his shirt untucked, sweat drying on his brow like a badge of rebellion. He had just been fired for helping a biker no one else would touch. A silence hung between him and the other mechanics, an unspoken cocktail of disbelief, disapproval, and shame none dared to voice. Rider Wolf Gannon was gone. The Harley's rumble, now just a memory drifting across the desert. Terry didn't expect applause, but he had hoped for something, perhaps a nod of quiet respect or even a grunt of solidarity. But the others had turned away, afraid of guilt by association. So he walked, out the garage door, across the back lot littered with junk parts and oil slick puddles, and onto the dusty sidewalk that led toward home. Terry's duplex sat near the edge of town, just past a chain of boarded-up storefronts and a dive bar named the Tumbleglass, where broken dreams and cheap whiskey flowed in equal measure. As he walked past, the door creaked open and a wiry woman stepped out, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Charlene Red, early 50s, sun-worn skin and messy blonde hair that had once been platinum, leaned against the wall in fishnet sleeves and a faded rock band tee. Her voice rasped from years of unfiltered Camels. "Thought I saw you on that corner," she said, exhaling smoke. "You off early, Cole?" "Fired," he replied flatly. Charlene let out a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "About time." Earl's a bastard and Donnie's a racist prick. You help someone again? Yeah, he said, and kept walking. Charlene didn't press. She never did. Once, years ago, she'd lost a son to heroin and a husband to the highway. Since then, she'd kept her conversations short and her kindness sharp. She watched him go and whispered, "Good man," before flicking ash into the dirt. At home, Terry climbed the steps to the second-floor unit, his arms aching more from disappointment than labor. Inside, a soft humming filled the small apartment. Amy was at the window in her chair, watching the late sun melt into the hills. Her long brown hair was tied in a loose braid, her head tilted slightly, eyes lit with recognition. Her art pad sat open on the tray in front of her, a drawing half-finished, two figures on a motorcycle, riding into the wind. Terry crouched beside her. "Guess what, trouble? We're on vacation." She smiled with her eyes, reached forward slowly with her crayon, and scribbled a small sun over the motorcycle. Terry felt a tightness in his chest. "We're going to be all right," he lied, voice steady. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the last gas station north of town, Wolf Gannon tore through the highway with teeth gritted against the wind. His eyes scanned the horizon, his mind racing faster than his bike. His son, Tyler, had been admitted to Carson Valley Regional after being found unconscious by the side of the highway. Collapsed lung, fractured skull, internal bleeding. The doctors had called it critical. Wolf didn't cry, but he came close. When he looked in Terry Cole's eyes, it was the first time in years he had felt seen, really seen. 3 hours later, he reached the hospital. The ER buzzed with fluorescent fatigue and urgent motion. Nurses moved like chess pieces, purposeful and quiet. A receptionist named Jenny Dawson, in her 30s, short with a pixie cut and a clipboard always at hand, directed him to ICU room 17. "He's stable," she said, but it was close. Tyler lay in bed with tubes in his arms and bruises on his face, barely breathing, but alive. Wolf stood at the foot of the bed for a long time before reaching into his pocket and pulling out the rag Terry had used to clean his hands, forgotten on the bike seat. He gripped it tightly, then whispered, "Thank you, man." Back in Copper Ridge, Terry spent the next day calling around. Tire shops, tow yards, even a scrapyard over by Blister Rock. No one was hiring. Not a young black mechanic who'd just been fired for insubordination. Earl's voice had clearly done its work. By mid-afternoon, he was sitting on the porch with a glass of warm water, flipping through his notebook of therapy notes and cost breakdowns for Amy's treatment. Each page felt heavier than the last. Then came a knock. Not a hesitant tap, but a firm, deliberate knock. Terry stood, crossed the room, and opened the door. There stood Deputy Wade Granger, tall, broad, early 40s with sandy brown hair and a mustache that tried too hard. His uniform was crisp, his boots freshly shined. He carried the authority of a man who had never been told no, and his pale blue eyes held that familiar gleam of disdain. "Terry Cole," Wade said, removing his sunglasses slowly. "I hear you caused quite the stir yesterday." Terry leaned on the doorframe. "I helped a man. Guess that's against the law now." Wade smirked. "No law against help-in. But when help-in means disobeying your boss, that's called bad judgment. And around here, bad judgment sticks. You come to arrest me, or just waste breath?" "Neither," Wade said, stepping back. "Just let in. You know we keep an eye on trouble, especially the kind that stirs up outsiders." The door shut before he finished his sentence. That night, Terry and Amy ate canned chili and listened to a cassette of Marvin Gaye on the old stereo. The world felt still. Amy drew a new picture, Terry with a cape, fixing a motorcycle. Underneath, she wrote with block letters, "Hero." He chuckled softly. "You got too much faith in me, kid." But somewhere deep inside, a part of him believed it too. The desert wind had cooled by morning, whistling low through the alleyways and rusting fence lines of Copper Ridge. It was the kind of chill that came after a scorching day, not cold enough for jackets, but sharp enough to remind folks the seasons were shifting. Sunlight broke over the town like a spotlight on a stage that hadn't changed sets in decades. The neon signs flickered awake one by one. The pawn shop, the diner, the liquor store, each humming like a tired chorus of survival. Terry Cole stood in front of his bathroom mirror, the light above flickering with the same erratic rhythm as his thoughts. He hadn't shaved. Dark stubble framed his jaw and chin, his eyes rimmed with the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. He splashed water on his face and stared at himself. Fired. For doing the right thing. For helping a man nobody else would touch. The ache in his chest wasn't pride or regret. It was heavier than both. It was the weight of knowing that in Copper Ridge, decency had a price, and he had just paid it in full. Amy was already awake. She was propped up in her chair by the window, her sketchbook open, crayons scattered like petals around her tray. She had drawn a new scene. Terry standing in front of a garage with flames behind him. But his face was calm, almost peaceful. She handed it to him when he passed, and he kissed her forehead gently. "You see too much," he murmured. He poured himself some coffee, the last scoop from a near-empty tin, and sat down with his notebook of phone numbers and job leads. Most were already crossed out. Still, he circled one, Hudson Repair, a dusty little shop 2 towns over in Elmont Creek. It wasn't much, but it was far enough from Earl and Deputy Wade to be worth a shot. He made the call. A woman answered, voice rough but not unkind. "Hudson's." "Speak." "Yes, ma'am," Terry said. "Name's Terry Cole. I'm a mechanic, looking for work. I heard you might be hiring." A pause. "Then, come by Tuesday. Bring your hands and a good attitude. Leave your problems at the door." "Yes, ma'am," he said again. She hung up without another word. That was something, at least. Later that day, Terry made his way to the Copper Bean, a local cafe that sat between the hardware store and the church thrift shop. The coffee was weak, but the Wi-Fi was free, and the waitress let him sit for hours so long as he tipped. Her name was Bethany Birdie Lyle, mid-30s, slim with sharp eyes, a sleeve of tattoos hidden under a long-sleeved flannel, even in the heat. Birdie had once studied architecture in Reno before her mother got sick, pulling her back to Copper Ridge. She had a blunt, no-nonsense kindness that didn't ask questions unless you looked like you needed them. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said, refilling his chipped mug. "I haven't," Terry replied. "You gonna tell me what happened, or sit there and brood like a country song?" "I got fired. Helped someone no one wanted to help. Manager blew a gasket." "Let me guess," she said. "Earl." "Yeah." Birdie snorted. "That man's been angry since the Hoover Dam was built." "You did right then." He gave a half-smile. "Doesn't pay the bills." She slid a cookie onto his saucer. "Neither does regret." As he sipped, the cafe door creaked open, and in walked Deputy Wade Granger, still polished like a sheriff from a catalog. He scanned the room like he owned it, spotted Terry, and made his way over. Birdie stiffened slightly, the way people do when they smell a storm coming. "Cole," Wade said, removing his sunglasses with theatrical slowness. "We need to talk." "Unless you're paying for my coffee, we don't," Terry replied. Wade leaned down slightly, voice lowering. "Word's gotten around. About what happened at Red Rock. You're stirring up things that don't need stirring. Best keep your head low. This town's got a memory." "So do I," Terry said. "And mine's tired of being polite." Wade's smile thinned. "That your final word?" "It's the only one I got left." He straightened and walked off without another glance. But Birdie watched him until the door clicked shut. "He doesn't like when people don't flinch," she muttered. "You're on his list now." "I've always been on it," Terry said. He just finally said it out loud. By evening, Terry was back home, reviewing his tools, packing them into a canvas bag. He told Amy about Elmont Creek. She didn't speak, but she pointed to a drawing she had taped to the wall. A man on a road, sun ahead, dark clouds behind. That was her way of saying go. He smiled. "Yeah, I think it's time." Then came the knock again, firm, steady. He opened the door and froze. It was Wolf Gannon. This time not on his Harley, but in a dusty black pickup with Nevada plates and a dog in the back seat. A tan mutt with pointed ears and a scar down one leg. The dog barked once and settled. Wolf looked different in daylight. Less dangerous. More worn. His vest was gone, replaced by a denim jacket. His hair was tied back, beard trimmed slightly. But the eyes, those stayed sharp. "I said I wouldn't let it in like that," he said. "You didn't have to come back," Terry said. "I did," Wolf replied. "Tyler made it." "Barely. He's awake." First thing he said was, "Did you find a guy who helped you?" Wolf rubbed the back of his neck. "So I did. Terry waited. Wolf pulled a small envelope from his coat. This isn't charity. It's thanks. What you did cost you. That ain't right. He handed it over. Inside were $500 in 20s. I can't take this. You will, Wolf said, because we don't leave good men bleeding in the dirt. Terry hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. The dog in the truck barked again. Wolf grinned. That's Buck. Rescued him 2 years back. Doesn't trust anyone but me and the kid. Guess he likes you. Terry laughed. That's rare company. As Wolf turned to go, he paused. You get in trouble again, call me. Or show up. You've got more friends than you think. And with that, he drove off, the sun setting behind him in a blaze of orange. Terry stood there a long time, envelope in hand, before stepping back inside. He taped Amy's latest drawing to the wall and sat beside her. We're gonna make it, he said. This time he wasn't lying. The desert sky stretched wide and unbroken over Copper Ridge as dawn seeped into its corners. Pale orange light pooled against old shingles, telephone poles, and barbed wire fences, peeling back the night with a reluctant sigh. It was the kind of morning that didn't promise much, just another day in a town that had forgotten how to change. But somewhere beneath the quiet hum of routine, something small had shifted. Not enough to be seen, but enough to be felt. Terry Cole moved slowly through his tiny kitchen, trying to act like nothing had happened. The envelope Wolf gave him was tucked deep inside his tool bag, hidden between a torque wrench and a pair of cracked gloves. He didn't know what he was more afraid of, losing the money or getting used to it. Across the room, Amy sat by the window in her chair, her eyes tracking the sparrows hopping along the power lines. She hadn't said anything all morning, not with her hands, not with her eyes. That silence carried more weight than any question. He poured her a glass of apple juice and set it on the tray beside her sketch pad. Got some leads, he said. Talked to a shop in Elmont Creek. Might start next week if it pans out. Amy didn't look up. Instead, she picked up a crayon and began drawing, slow and deliberate. Terry tried again. That means we might get closer to Reno. That therapy center you like. Still nothing. He sighed and turned toward the door, grabbing his boots. Behind him, her hands stopped moving. Then she tore the page from her pad and held it out. Terry turned, heart sinking as he took the drawing. It was a simple image. 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a flat line of desert, a tiny sun above them. Below it, written in her blocky handwriting, "We don't give up." He folded the paper carefully, almost reverently. I didn't give up, he said softly. I got pushed. Amy blinked slowly, then touched his hand. That was all it took. He sat down beside her, pulling his chair closer. I'll figure it out. For both of us. Later that day, the air in Copper Ridge felt different, charged, almost electric. Word had begun to spread, as it often did in small towns where truth was negotiable and stories traveled faster than facts. A Hell's Angel had shown up at the Dusted Horn, the only bar still running in town after midnight. There'd been shouting, then flashing lights. Someone said a deputy had drawn his weapon. Others claimed the biker was demanding justice for a mechanic who got canned for being decent. The details were blurry, but the message was clear. People were starting to talk, and Terry's name was in their mouths. At the Dusted Horn, bartender Vance Mercer, a barrel-chested man with thinning red hair and a permanent scowl, stood behind the counter wiping down mugs with more force than necessary. Vance had run the bar for 20 years and trusted no one but his elderly German shepherd, Roscoe, who slept behind the bar like an old soldier. Vance didn't like trouble, but he liked injustice even less. That night, the biker had walked in, leather cut gleaming, voice calm but firm. He didn't start a fight, but he didn't back down either. Said his brother got done dirty, and that people better start looking at who's really dangerous in this town. Then Wade Granger showed up, badge shining, gun hand twitching. Tension thick enough to bottle. But Roscoe had stood up and growled, a deep, bone-rattling sound that made even Wade pause. I never seen Roscoe do that, Vance told a regular the next morning. Dog's got better judgment than most folks. You ask me, that deputy's more scared than pissed. By noon, Terry couldn't walk a block without someone stopping him. Some offered quiet nods. Others gave him space, as if his new reputation might rub off. One older woman at the grocery store, Mrs. Helen Cordery, patted his arm and said, "Your mother would be proud," before shuffling off with her bag of lentils. That afternoon, Terry returned home to find a folded note tucked into his doorframe. It was written on ruled paper in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "I believe you did the right thing. Some of us are watching. Don't disappear." No signature. He stared at it for a long time before tucking it into the same drawer where Amy's drawing now lived. Later, he sat outside on the stoop, feet bare, a mug of cooling coffee in his hand. A young cat appeared from behind the trash bins, a slim orange tabby with torn ears and wide green eyes. It crept close, sniffing cautiously before curling up beside his foot like it had always belonged there. Terry glanced down. "You don't ask much, do you?" The cat flicked its tail, unimpressed. Amy named it Cricket later that evening, after the way it chirped when she scratched behind its ears. She giggled for the first time in days, and Terry felt something crack inside him. Not from pain, but from relief. He didn't sleep much that night. The voices in town were growing louder. Someone said a reporter from Nevada Plains Weekly was asking questions. Someone else said Wolf Gannon was part of a bigger chapter of writers with lawyers' connections. And someone else said Earl was shaking, scared of what might come down if the garage became part of a lawsuit. In the dark, Terry sat beside Amy, watching her chest rise and fall. Her new drawing sat on the wall. The desert, the figures, the sun. "We don't give up." No, he thought. We don't. And in the stillness of the room, he decided, if the town was going to talk, then he was going to give them something worth remembering. It was just past 6 a.m. when the shrill ring of the landline phone shattered the morning stillness. In the haze of sleep, Terry Cole stumbled from his mattress on the living room floor, careful not to wake Amy, who was still curled peacefully under her quilt. The light beyond the blinds had barely begun to shift, a pre-dawn gray that painted the apartment in soft, uncertain outlines. Cricket, the orange tabby who had adopted them days ago, stretched on the windowsill and let out a tiny yawn. Terry grabbed the receiver. "Hello." A pause, then a calm voice, gravel-edged but familiar. "Cole, it's Ray Gannon." Terry blinked the sleep from his eyes. "Wolf." "Yeah, real name's Raymond. Didn't think I'd be calling you this early, but it's important." "You busy this morning?" Terry looked over at Amy's chair, then at his boots near the door. "Not yet. I need you to come to the Civic Center. 8 a.m. sharp. There's a meeting you ought to be part of. Some folks are finally listening." Terry frowned. "What kind of meeting?" Ray's tone changed, measured now. The kind that could change what people see when they hear your name. "Come clean, dressed how you want to be remembered." He hung up before Terry could ask anything more. By 7:30, Terry was pulling on the Lee-stained shirt he owned, dark gray, pressed as well as his old iron could manage, and laced up his boots with a quiet tension in his chest. Amy, now awake, sat nearby in her robe, her hair still wild from sleep, but her eyes wide and curious. He told her about the call. She held up a drawing she had made in secret overnight. A stick figure standing behind a microphone, facing a crowd of blank faces. In her scratchy handwriting, she'd written, "Say it loud." Terry smiled. "Guess I don't have a choice now." The Copper Ridge Civic Center was a squat brick building that looked more like a storm shelter than a hub for town decisions. The paint around the windows flaked like old sunburn, and the flag outside the entrance sagged slightly in the windless morning. But on this particular day, the gravel lot was already half full, and two news vans, one marked KTMU Nevada Live and the other Channel 8 Carson Current, stood parked just beyond the steps. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and floor polish. Folding chairs had been arranged in uneven rows, facing a long table where several men and women sat in front of microphones and paper cups. Among them was Clara DeWitt, a sharp-featured woman in her late 40s, with chestnut hair in a precise bob and horn-rimmed glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Clara had the posture of a lawyer and the patience of someone who didn't have to prove anything anymore. She was the chief counsel for Gannon Motors. Terry hesitated near the back until he saw Ray, clean-shaven now, wearing a dark navy jacket, boots polished. He stood beside a tall man in a charcoal gray suit with a navy handkerchief tucked in the breast pocket. That man, Samuel Gannon, had white hair combed neatly back, a square jaw, and the unmistakable presence of someone who wasn't used to being questioned. Ray caught Terry's eye and gave a brief nod, motioning him forward. Terry moved through the narrow aisle, the floor creaking beneath each step, until he stood just beside the table. Samuel stood and extended a hand. "Terry Cole, thank you for coming. I'm Sam Gannon." Terry shook his hand. The grip was firm. "You own Gannon Motors." "My family does, yes. But my brother tells me you've been running on more principle than most of my managers lately." Before Terry could respond, the back doors opened again. A new figure entered. Deputy Wade Granger, still in uniform, eyes darting as though scanning for threats. He looked surprised to see the setup, the cameras, the legal team. Clara DeWitt stood. "Deputy Granger, please take a seat. You're here at Mr. Gannon's request, not on official business." Wade clenched his jaw, but sat in the back row. His presence was quieter than usual, like someone waiting for his own trial. The meeting began. Clara addressed the room. "We're here because of an incident that occurred at a Gannon-sponsored repair facility, Red Rock Auto. One of our employees was terminated without cause after offering mechanical assistance to a civilian in need who happened to be the brother of our company's co-founder." She gestured toward Ray. "This situation has raised serious ethical concerns about workplace bias, employee protection, and community trust." Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras clicked. Wade's foot tapped quietly against the linoleum. Clara continued, now looking directly at Terry. "Mr. Cole, would you mind sharing what happened in your words?" Terry glanced at Ray, then at the audience. He wasn't used to crowds, but Amy's drawing flickered in his mind like a spark. He cleared his throat. "I was working my shift. A man came in, bike broken, panicked. Said his son was in the ICU. Nobody wanted to help. I saw someone who needed a hand, not a headline. So I helped." "And what was the response from your employer?" "I was fired. No warning. Just out." "And Deputy Granger?" Clara's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Terry didn't flinch. "He showed up to remind me of my place. But I already knew where I stood." There was a ripple through the crowd, one that couldn't be attributed to the air conditioning. Samuel Gannon stood again. "Mr. Cole, we've reviewed the records, the testimony, and more importantly, your work. I'm ashamed it took so long to learn your name. You showed integrity when no one else did. I can't change what happened yesterday, but I can change what happens next." He turned toward the crowd. "Effective immediately, Mr. Cole is offered full reinstatement within Gannon Motors, not at Red Rock, but at our new development facility in Carson City. Lead technician. Benefits, housing assistance, and the resources to pursue any certification he chooses." Terry stared, speechless. Then a single clap echoed from the back row. It was from a woman in a tan cardigan. Marjorie Fields, former principal of Copper Ridge Elementary and one of the town's oldest residents. Her clap was slow, deliberate, and soon joined by others. Wade sat still. After the meeting, Ray clapped Terry on the back. "Told you. Wouldn't end that way." Terry just shook his head, overwhelmed. Back home that evening, he told Amy everything. She didn't respond immediately, just turned her pad toward him. The picture was of a tall building with a sign that said Gannon. Standing in front were two stick figures, her and Terry, and above them, in big red crayon, "We made them listen." He picked her up gently and said, "We did, baby girl. We really did." The air in Copper Ridge felt lighter, almost celebratory, though the desert still wore its familiar dusty scent. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Terry Cole stood with his shoulders fully back and his eyes fixed forward, no longer hunched by the weight of unspoken rules and small-town judgment. Just days after the Civic Center meeting, the Gannon Motors announcement had spread far beyond state lines. Local news ran it for 3 straight nights, and clips of Terry's calm testimony went viral on community sites. In grocery stores, strangers now offered him handshakes instead of side eyes. It felt surreal, like watching a slow movie in reverse. By Friday morning, Terry was packing. The apartment, once filled with the quiet strain of uncertainty, now buzzed with the soft joy of change. Boxes lined the front hallway. Amy sat by the window as always, but this time her sketch pad was full of bold colors: blues, reds, deep golds. Her latest drawing featured a new city skyline with the words, "Our next chapter," arched above a building marked G. Cricket the tabby circled the final box of books, leaping in and promptly falling asleep inside it. Terry chuckled and scratched behind her ears. "You're not cargo, you're family." That afternoon, the moving van rolled up, driven by a soft-spoken man named Caleb Finch, mid-30s, stocky, with a mess of auburn curls under a faded denim cap. Caleb had a birthmark shaped like a comma on his left cheek and a voice that never rose above a hum. He worked for a small veteran-owned moving company and had driven up from Carson specifically because Gannon sent us the best for the best. He surveyed the modest apartment and smiled. "You pack tight," he said. "Not bad for a mechanic." Terry grinned. "Old habit. Everything has a place." They loaded the boxes with practiced ease, while Amy watched through the front window, occasionally waving when Caleb looked up. He returned the gesture each time with a shy salute. It was close to sundown when the truck pulled away. Terry lingered a moment on the steps. The apartment, the stoop, the broken mailbox, they had been chapters of struggle, yes, but also of resilience. He locked the door one last time. The drive to Reno was smoother than expected. The highways opened up under the stars, and the desert seemed to hum with possibility. Amy sat in the back, humming softly to her favorite cassette, an old jazz mix that Terry's mother used to play on quiet evenings. Cricket nestled beside her, purring against a rolled-up sweater. Reno greeted them with city lights and clean sidewalks, a different kind of dust in the air, fresher, unfamiliar. Their new housing, arranged by Gannon Motors, was a modest duplex in a quiet neighborhood near the Spark City line. The garage wasn't far. The next morning, Terry stood before it. A wide, newly painted facility with tall glass panes and the Gannon emblem on a polished sign above the entrance. Just below it, a new plaque gleamed in brass. "Cole's Garage, built on grit and grace." His throat tightened. Inside, the team was already gathered. They wore crisp uniforms and moved with the quiet, serious rhythm of people who knew how to work. Yolanda Yo Haskins, the assistant manager, greeted him first, a tall black woman in her early 40s with tight coiled braids, sharp brown eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude honed over 2 decades in the field. She extended a hand. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Been waiting to meet the man who flipped a whole damn town on its head." Terry laughed, took her hand. "Just try to do the right thing." "That's the difference," she replied. "Most people try. You did." He met the rest of the crew. Luis Moreno, a lanky tech with grease under his nails and a grin that rarely left his face. Mika Talbot, a quiet but brilliant diagnostics specialist who used to work in aircraft maintenance. And Jared Reese, a veteran nearing retirement who nodded respectfully but said little. Yolanda handed him the keys to the main office. "This is yours now. Tools, scheduling, hiring. You run it the way you see fit. And if anyone gives you static," she pointed toward the Gannon sign, "you remind them why your name's on that plaque." Just then, the front door chimed. Raymond Gannon walked in. No leather vest, no bike chain, just a plain button-down shirt and jeans. His gait was slower today, the edges around him softer, but his eyes still held that deep, deliberate fire. Beside him stood a teenage boy, Tyler Gannon, 15, lean, mop of black hair under a knit cap, and hospital bracelets still clinging to his left wrist. He moved carefully, but his eyes were alive, curious. Tyler stared up at Terry. "You're the guy," he said. Terry smiled. "Guess I am." Ray pulled Terry into a rough hug, voice low. "He's gonna be okay. Asked about you first thing he woke up. Said he wanted to see the man who fixed his dad's bike like it was nothing." Terry stepped back and looked at Tyler. "I just gave your dad a little help. He did the rest." Tyler grinned. "Still, you changed things." Later that day, after the introductions and the paperwork, Terry sat on a bench outside the garage. Amy wheeled up beside him, a sketch pad in her lap. The wind tugged gently at the edge of her page. She turned the pad to him. It showed the same image she'd drawn before. The sun rising over a building, 2 figures in front. But now, the building had windows, lights, signs, and a crowd of people around it, all drawn in color. Underneath, she had written, "Justice isn't loud. It's steady." He didn't say a word, just reached out, took her hand, and squeezed. Inside, the sound of an engine revving filled the air, a clean hum, sharp and confident. The first car had arrived. The work was just beginning. Life doesn't always reward the loudest voice or the strongest fist. Sometimes it honors the quiet ones, the ones who help without being asked, who stand up when it costs them something, who keep moving forward even when the world turns its back. Terry's story is a reminder that character is built in silence, in choices no one sees, in the small moments when you do what's right, not for applause, but because it's who you are. In our everyday lives, we all face those moments. A stranger needing help, a colleague treated unfairly, a choice between comfort and courage. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment and tell us. Have you ever stood up for someone when it wasn't easy? And if you believe the world needs more people like Terry, people of grit and grace, comment amen below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more stories that matter, and may God bless you and everyone you love.